Good morning and welcome. Thank you all for joining us this morning for the first part of our series in rethinking teacher workforce solutions. During today's webinar, we ask that if you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat. If time allows, we may have a Q&A in which you can be unmuted and ask further questions. We also will provide information following today's webinar.
Thank you, and good morning again. I am Stevie Lawrence, and I serve as the Vice President for Post-Secondary Education at the Southern Regional Education Board. You should know that SREB is an interstate compact for education throughout the Southern U.S. SREB works with states to improve education at every level, providing policymakers with reliable data to inform sound policy decisions. Further, we help states collaborate to share resources, serving educators with training that transforms teaching to prepare students for their futures. This morning, we are joined by two great panelists, Dr. Lisa Eads, who serves as the Associate Vice President for Academic Programs at the North Carolina Community College System, and Dr. Andrea Kent, who serves as the Interim Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs and the former Dean of Education at the University of South Alabama. And they will share their insight this morning on how to expand additional pathways for prospective teachers to enter the field and provide education to students across our country. And now we'll turn it over to our panelists and Megan Boren, who leads this this project for SREB.
Thanks, Stevie. I appreciate the introduction there. We're also joined by another one of our colleagues at SREB, Jessica Snellings. We make up the teacher workforce policy team at SREB. We're really pleased to be here with you guys today and share some exciting work that we have going on with some of our states in the Southeast and some research and other work that we're doing to provide resources to all of our states in SREB as well as around the country. Our team is currently working to try and help states really think about holistic change to teacher workforce policy and improving the teacher pipeline through those holistic changes, and with the end goal really being to end teacher shortages, which is plaguing all of our states in the Southeast as well as most states around the country. When you're thinking about these kinds of policies to really transform the teacher workforce, improve the pipeline, the quantity, quality, and diversity of our teacher workforce, and ending the shortages, it really covers quite a list of different topic areas that state education leaders and policymakers need to tackle, ranging from, as you can see here on the screen, recruitment and preparation, all the way through to equity, quality supports, retention, advancement, compensation, and not forgetting some big pieces around diversity, as well as teacher licensure. Today, we're really going to kind of talk about the beginning aspect of this circle, if you will, touching on recruitment, preparation, and diversity. And we also have two more webinars coming up where we'll talk about some more of these pieces that you see here on the wheel. So we're excited to provide this information to you all and begin these conversations, if you will, with some of our states here. Jessica, if you'll click ahead for me. We wanted to let you all know that as part of our work with the teacher workforce policy stream, it's not just analyzing and publishing research, although it's a key piece for us, but also we have an arm of our work that includes convening several of our states and really helping state education leaders and policymakers within these states to sit down and have, over the course of many months and perhaps even years in some cases, really collaborative, deep, open, honest conversations about what's going on in the state related to teacher shortages and teacher pipeline issues. We sit down and these diverse groups of policymakers, state agency staff, educators, associations, and different advocates really work and talk through answering some of the big questions that most of our state leaders are having these days. Thinking about what's really been the barriers, what's really been the issues and the problems and the contributions toward the teacher shortages that are plaguing us these days. And how can we really understand the evolution of those things, what the consequences are of different policy changes, and then forward looking, how can we really be innovative and creative in thinking through solutions to address these shortages and improve our teacher pipeline. So our team's been working with these 4 states you see on the screen, North Carolina, Alabama, Oklahoma, and Mississippi, for quite some time now, and engaging in these conversations and having some of these really rich discussions. And we're really pleased that Lisa from North Carolina and Andy from Alabama, who are 2 participants on those 2 roundtables, are here to join us today and sharing some of their work, as well as a touch into conversations that have occurred on these roundtables. So today's topic, as I mentioned, is really talking about, if you could click ahead for me, Jessica. Today's topic, as I mentioned, is really around the recruitment and preparation and diversity of our teacher workforce, and thinking about expanding pathways into teaching. So we hope to talk today a little bit and provide you all some different ideas and look into ways to expand the quantity, quality, and diversity of the teaching workforce, starting with the beginning of what we call a teacher career continuum at SREB, and really helping to expand the pathways, the supports, improve the preparation of our teacher candidates who will become the future of our workforce. So we're going to talk a lot about early recruitment today and the advantages of recruiting earlier and giving experience and practice to future teachers much earlier than is provided in a lot of cases. We're also going to talk about reducing the barriers into the profession, including the cost barriers that are there for preparing to become a teacher. In some cases, a lack of enough practice to really be ready for the job, which is a key thing that many teachers say they wish they had had more practice and more preparation before entering their teaching job. We're also going to talk about expanding course structures and different kinds of creative partnerships with local districts, as well as expanding pathway options, and talking about different ways that colleges and agencies can work together to expand the opportunities for preparation in different ways into the teaching profession. Noting that it's really important, no matter how states or localities expand pathway options into the teaching profession, that the state also needs to think along the lines of making sure that every teacher faces the same equal standards once they get into the profession, no matter where they came from on the preparation side. And then, of course, we're going to talk about better preparing teachers for the job and the issues that they will face when they walk in the door. So I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Jessica Snellings, who's going to talk a little bit more about these pieces and provide an overview for you guys. And we're going to have our panelists talk with you all today as well.
Good morning, everyone. So recruiting and preparing teachers is the first in a series of important steps to help end teacher shortages, as well as increase the quantity, quality, and diversity of the teacher workforce. SREB convened a teacher preparation commission for 2 years, and it concluded with a commission report in January of 2019. Since then, our team has continued to research the policies and practices on recruiting and preparing teachers, as well as continuing to convene education leaders through our roundtables to discuss the barriers and solutions to the teacher shortage problems and workforce diversity problems. There are countless great ideas and improvements that could be made, and we'd like to highlight that no one solution is a silver bullet to these issues. We advocate a comprehensive set of solutions to effect positive and productive change. Looking at recruitment and preparation, we encourage leaders to focus on early exposure, extended quality practice and teaching, and quality preparation programs in traditional and non-traditional programs that are all governed by the same equal standards. So some of the ideas that are emerging to help with our teacher shortage crisis is to spark interest early. And this is all the way back into middle schools, getting the ideas into middle school grade children's heads that teaching is a great profession that touches all other professions, as well as in high school through dual enrollment programs, through teacher academy or cadet programs that expose high schoolers to the teaching professions, as well as some externships for early practice in aiding a classroom. Another way to help with early recruitment and preparation is at the community college level. Community colleges can play more of a role to help with recruitment of diverse candidate groups. And through dual enrollment, they can help expand the pathways into teaching. It sets up the ideas of internships and apprentices after associate degree completion that may help people continue on into the teaching career. Of course, there are traditional preparation programs, which are still largely seen through research as the high quality preparation process for many universities. And quality programs should be incentivized to have students and candidates go through these preparation programs. Accountability systems are a great step to ensure the continued quality of traditional preparation programs. Not only do we need to talk about accountability with traditional preparation, but innovation in the preparation curriculum as well. They need to strengthen pedagogical instruction and course scheduling to allow for extended clinical experiences of over a year. Research has shown that clinical experiences is one of the best ways to help prepare teachers to enter the profession. Then we have creative pathways such as alternative preparation and career switchers. So alternative prep programs are increasing in popularity, and we must ensure that the quality is there in these alternative programs to continue to have great teachers in every one of our classrooms. These alternative prep programs, and including career switching, have creative recruitment that bring in a large diversity population. But all of these must be held to the same standards and have the same policies for entering the teaching profession. I now would like to turn it over to Dr. Lisa Eads, who is the Associate Vice President of Academic Programs for the North Carolina Community Colleges.
Thank you, Jessica. I'm very excited to join everyone this morning to talk to you about some new work that's happening in North Carolina and 2 new transfer programs that are focused on teacher preparation. So for many, many years, the North Carolina Community College system has had general transfer degrees in Associate in Arts and Associate in Science. And we've also been very aware of the need for us to play a more specific and focused role in the shortage needs of teachers in North Carolina. So we worked for, I guess it's been about 3 years. It took us to get to this place where we started with the idea of 1 teacher transfer degree that was specific for the teacher pipeline. And we ended up with 2 teacher transfer degrees, the Associate in Arts in Teacher Preparation and the associate in science and teacher preparation. And really the purpose of having two transfer programs that are focused on teacher prep is some of the licensure programs for STEM field required a little bit more specific math and science courses. So the degrees are very similar. They are heavy in gen ed, but they also have a focus concentration on education courses. So there are 4 EDU courses in both degrees that are shared. They have a specific literacy component, which is important given all the needs of literacy in our state. And they're not specific to a grade level. So the intent is to be focused enough to give students a foundational knowledge of education programs and help them prepare to enter a senior institution in the School of Education program, but also give them flexibility to go into K-6 or middle grades or high school programs and multiple licensure areas. So it's flexible yet structured. There's also within that concentration of education courses some specific field experience. That is something our senior partners really were very interested in, for us to have specific focused needs on early and often field experience. So with that, we now have the 2 new degrees. They were effective this fall. They also are designed to help our colleges and rural areas in our state, as well as urban, to have grow your own programs. So there are 100 counties in North Carolina. There are 58 community colleges in our system, and we serve all 100 counties. We're very happy to say we've had a very good relationship for many, many, many years with our public and private universities, but not everyone in our state can afford to move to where a university is. So having this idea of grow your own allows them to work and continue to live in their local community, and also continue their studies. Something we have heard from many of the school districts in our state is, a student may leave a rural area to go to a university and stay, right? They don't come back home. So it's almost like you're filtering the talent out of those most needed and high demand, hard to fill positions where folks just don't come back. So that grow your own model is a big component of this. We also recognize that we're lower cost, and I have a very flexible course offering structure with day, evening, and online. So we're able to remove the barrier of or lessen the barrier of cost, and so that does help to increase diversity within the program, as well as our students are by nature just a more diverse population. So very excited to say we're building on those components for these programs as well. Another big part of this degree, or these 2 degrees, is a high school pathway. So we have a program called Career and College Promise. It's our dual enrollment program that's legislated in the state. It is tuition free. So the state tax dollars pay tuition for qualified high school students to enroll in college classes. So what's exciting about that for the teacher preparation degrees is that we can have students as early as 9th grade, if they're gifted, or if they're not gifted and beginning in the junior year, taking college classes towards their associate degrees in teacher prep with no cost. So we have several students who might complete 30 hours, which is the pathway. That's about half of the associate degree, but we also have several that complete a full associate degree. So imagine being a high school senior with 2 years of college already behind you and paid for. So that's again another very exciting component of these programs. Also want to mention the articulation agreements. We have something called the Comprehensive Articulation Agreement with the public institutions. So our UNC system has 16 universities. And then we have an independent comprehensive articulation agreement with our private universities. So these 2 new preparation programs were built on those articulation agreements, but these programs now have their own agreements. So it allows us to move some more of that coursework that's education focused through these transfer programs, which were not included in the general transfer degrees. These programs also allow us to track students. So we now know who is a teacher transfer student, where before in our general programs, we wouldn't know that until they actually transferred to a senior institution. With North Carolina community colleges, we have a common course numbering system, which makes it a little bit more easy for us to do these transfer agreements. I will say that has been a huge advantage in our state. We also have a dual credit agreement with our DPI partners, so our public schools. And so dual credit means for the high school students, there are some of our college classes that can meet high school graduation requirements, which again allows more efficiency and acceleration in a student's program of study. And in terms of the articulation agreements that are specific to these programs, we have a higher requirement for GPA, so a 2.7 GPA for transfer, which is again higher than our general transfer programs, which are 2.0. We also have a component of teacher cadet. So there's a chance for articulated credit, assuming the faculty member in the high school meets our accreditation requirements for faculty credentialing. So we can have dual credit moving from the high school to our programs or from our programs to the high school. So again, alignment and acceleration and efficiency are components of these programs. So with that, I'll be glad to take any questions that you may have about our teacher preparation transfer programs in North Carolina.
Thank you, Lisa, for that, all those comments and information on all the hard work you guys have been doing at the community college system. We invite people to either write in the chat any questions that you have for Lisa, or you can let us know that you'd like to just go ahead and ask them audibly by, I think you have a raise your hand button, and Jasmine can allow you to just say your question out loud for Lisa. We do have one already in the chat for you, so I'll just read that real quick. Do all of your higher education prep traditional programs easily transfer in courses from these degrees for core courses in their programs? We have many that transfer in core ed courses from community colleges as electives, but not core plan of study requirements. Curious how this looks with these two degrees from community colleges and transferability. Sounds like through the articulation agreements, I would love to see what that looks like. That's from Rebecca Estes.
Thank you, Rebecca, for that question. So what's really wonderful about these two programs is that they're each 60 to 61 hours. And so within the transfer articulation agreement, 60 of those hours transfer to a senior institution. So that is truly a 2+2. Our UNC system has a requirement of 120 hours as a cap for those four-year degrees. So the agreement itself, again, it's heavy concentration in gen ed, but those four basic courses, those education courses, will plug into a student's program of study at a senior institution towards that 120-hour requirement. So in terms of if it plugs in as a core requirement or an elective, that's really up to the institution, but the idea is the students don't lose credit. So it all counts towards their completion for that senior partner. So that's, again, very specific. I will say it wasn't easy to get to that. There are lots of things that are required in our senior institution programs. So that foundational four classes is really what's unique about the program, but it does allow the senior partner to have some flexibility, so they're not mandated to one-to-one plug in those courses in the same way across the state.
We've got a couple more questions coming in for you. Tim Newbert asks, what is the number of participants in your North Carolina program? How does that number compare to your goal?
That's a very great question, Tim. Fall 20 was the first time we accepted students into these programs. So I mentioned we have 58 community colleges in the state. At this point, 34 of the 58 have been approved to offer those new programs. So we won't have data for the first set of students until probably about March, since we started in August. So our goal truly is to help increase the teacher pipeline. So we don't have a specific number for the state at this time in terms of how many students to enroll. But what I can tell you is the momentum and the interest both with our colleges and with senior institutions continues to grow. So there truly hasn't been a month, there hasn't been a month since we created these new programs that we haven't had more of our colleges gaining approval. We do have the independent colleges. There are 18 of those institutions signed on to that new agreement, and we are finalizing the agreement with the UNC system, and that'll be 16 senior institution partners. So what we're expecting is there'll be a shift from general transfer, associate in arts and science to the teacher prep program degrees. So we'll probably see some funneling of existing students into these new degree programs, so basically changing their major. So I hope that somewhat answered, Tim. We'll have more to come. I'll say a year from now, we expect to have much more data for you.
Susan Shedd asks, did you say that some receive a scholarship to be part of these programs? If so, where does the money come from?
So we do, Susan, have state funding for our dual enrollment program. So there is a slide here for you with some links to additional information, the curriculum standard links. If you click on that and go to transfer, you'll be able to see the actual program of study for each of these teacher prep degrees. But Career and College Promise, that link will take you to our dual enrollment program that gives you a little bit more background about how it works and how students qualify. So high school students have tuition paid for when they enroll in Career and College Promise. And there's no minimum or maximum commitment from a student. So a student in high school can take one course, or they could finish the full associate degree while they're still eligible and have tuition paid for. Now, textbooks and fees, those depends on the school, how those are handled. That's not covered in the legislation. One goal for these programs, though, is to have little or no cost to the student to complete the full four-year degree. So we haven't asked for legislative funding for that, but we have lots of discussions going on around how to pay for the last 2 years and also how to help support students who are adults who aren't in that dual enrollment program to get some money to cover that tuition. So we've talked about some possibilities around teaching fellows for community college students, or if there is grant money from one of our partners to help cover some of that. But I will say we have lots of legislative interest and support. So I do expect at some point there to be some specific scholarships set aside for adults. So we do have that for high school students now.
Great. Another question from Renee Ruiz, and I'll just say, I apologize if I mispronounce anyone's names. I'll do the best that I can, but no offense hopefully taken by anyone if I butcher your name. But Renee asks, are school districts financially supporting program participants?
So tuition is paid for, but some districts are covering textbooks and some districts are covering fees. Additionally, some of our college campuses waive fees for high school students or provide foundation money to cover fees or textbooks. So districts are our partners, of course, but it does depend. If it's a rural district, probably not covering textbooks because there's just not funding there. If it's a more urban district, there may be. I'm thinking like Charlotte Meck, they cover textbooks. So then that, of course, as you all know, that can be a huge expense. So yes, in some cases, districts provide some additional financial support.
Great. Tim Newbert has another question. Does your program provide more supports or encouragement for future teachers in the subject areas most in need, such as STEM, special education, or foreign languages?
So that's really a great question, Tim. In terms of what our transfer degrees provide, it is really foundational content knowledge for education. Now, in the associate in science, we have higher level math and science courses that are gen eds that are required. But truly those specialty subject areas with special ed or foreign language or license in STEM fields, that occurs at the senior institution. So we aren't really replacing what the senior partners are doing. We're just helping to prepare students to be more ready for those once they transfer from our colleges.
Deborah Burson asks, what are the 4 courses?
So Deborah, you can see those if you click on that curriculum standard link and then click on transfer and teacher prep. So I'll just give you a kind of a general overview. There is a course on literacy. There is a course on policy and education, which is Foundations of Ed. There is a course on teaching as a profession. So that is really helping students navigate School of Education admission, praxis, and TPA. And then there's one other course, and I'm blanking right now, but Deborah, you can see those in the standards. And if you want the course descriptions for those, my contact information will be made available, and I'll be glad to send those to you directly.
Great. Another question from Tim Newbert, full of good questions, Tim. Any special focus on teachers of color?
So, Tim, I really appreciate that question. The community college system in North Carolina has not just been part of SREB's work. We've also been part of our governor's Diversity Task Force for Education, which is the acronym DRIVE. So, yes, we have a very special focus on increasing diversity for teachers of color. And what that looks like is really a specific focus for rural areas. Certainly in our urban areas, we have quite a bit of diversity, but in rural areas, the outreach begins in high school and of course continues on our campuses. So we have some minority mentoring programs that are already in existence that we certainly intend to access and leverage. We also have something called the Career Coach Program. It's a state-funded program as well, and that is community college employees stationed in the high school. So they aren't just for teacher preparation, but the idea is to catch students who need some extra support and some guidance with career counseling. So certainly thinking about diversity for that as well. I will tell you that we are doing quite a bit with other student support services across the state to make sure that we are recruiting and also supporting students of color in all of our programs, but specifically for the teacher prep program, we're looking at really getting students to be more aware of this opportunity and also, again, supporting through removing financial burdens and barriers. So that should help us to increase that diversity in the pipeline.
A question from Cynthia Bolton-Gary. Did the community colleges push back at all on retooling the education courses, those common courses, for dual enrollment and transferability?
Cynthia, actually, no. Our community colleges wanted more than the 4 classes, as you can imagine. They would love to have had 30 of the 60 hours be education courses. Of course, that was just not possible when we looked at the needs for the senior partners. So I can tell you we have a very strong education faculty association across the state. So all 58 of the colleges do have education programs. These transfer programs are just the newest to come along that our faculty in those areas will be teaching or are teaching. So it's really leveraging the strengths that we already had. So that association of faculty have been the best recruiters thus far. We're also looking at some different structure for advising. So some of our campuses now have joint advising occurring through the faculty in those education programs and through our transfer advisors that are already on campuses. So that has, again, given some extra support for these new programs, and it's very specific to each campus, but no pushback. So very thankfully, very much around excitement for the program.
I think that's all of there's a couple maybe sort of little repeat questions there. But I did want to also ask you, Lisa, if you could share, if you all, going through this process of getting these degrees negotiated and all of the courses negotiated between community colleges and your senior partners, as well as the articulation agreements, are there a couple maybe key tips, lessons learned, if you will, that you could share with other states here who might be embarking on a similar undertaking?
Absolutely. I can tell you we learned quite a bit about what not to do as a part of the development of these programs. Again, trying to do too much with one degree, we learned over time that we just couldn't fit everything that was needed for the flexibility that we wanted for multiple licensure programs into one transfer degree. So having associate in arts and associate in science separate degrees was what we ended with, which was, again, a better fit for what the senior partners needed. We also began the discussion with one institution, so one community college, and with one senior partner. So NC State was part of a pilot with one of our community colleges, Johnston Community College. And that's really where we had the 1 degree pilot, where we were trying to align. I think they had 13 licensure areas that aligned with that 1 degree. But it ended to be very much STEM focused. As you all can imagine, NC State is a STEM focused institution. So that helped us to really get our feet on the ground. But the second part of that work included an expansion. So we had 5 additional universities, 3 public, 2 private, to have some further discussions. And we allowed those senior partners to identify their community college counterparts, so people they already knew that they were comfortable working with, to come into a joint meeting. We had 3 of those meetings, I believe, where we talked more about, okay, what do we need to make this happen statewide, not just to have a single pilot. And that group allowed us to really move down that path of 2 degrees. And so the final step in that work, we had an additional committee, a small committee. I think we had less than 10 people on that committee, to talk through what courses did we already have in our combined course library and what new courses were needed to meet the senior partners' request. So those degrees, of these 2 new programs, there is only 1 education course that already existed. The other 3 are brand new courses, again, to meet the need, and also not duplicate what's already out there. Changing a course in our combined course library changes it in any program that it's already offered in. So there was a need to think about coursework. So I will say that as you're starting these discussions, don't let yourself be limited by what you already have, and also don't get overwhelmed with trying to create everything brand new. So if you have something that's working, build on it. And if you don't, then it gives you a great opportunity.
That's really great advice. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
I'll just say we'll have some more time at the end for kind of general Q&A. So if any participants think of some more questions for Lisa, you can ask him at that time. But we'd like to hear now from our second panelist, Dr. Andy Kemp from the University of South Alabama. She's going to share a little bit of some interesting work that they've been doing on the traditional preparation side. So without further ado.
Good morning,
Andy?
everyone. Yeah, thank you, Megan. I'm honored to be here and to share with you a little bit of both things going on in South Alabama, as well as some things that are going on in the state as a whole. As I begin to share a few things, I think it's really important that I emphasize the role of our partners in this work that we do. At the University of South Alabama, we are situated in Mobile, Alabama, the southern part of the state. And it just so happens that the largest school district in our state is the Mobile County Public School System. It is in our backyard. We share the space together. And with that, we also have another very large school district, Baldwin County Public School System, that is very close to us. And with those 2 school districts, we do a lot of our work, and the partnership and the collaboration that we have with those districts it's historical. It's gone on for many, many, many years, and we continue to reinvent and expand and do different things that I fully recognize and put out there that we could not do the things that we do without the strong partnerships that we have with those districts. I would be remiss if I didn't mention a couple of other smaller districts that we also partner with a good bit, but I will say until the recent past, they were mostly part of Mobile School District, and we have spun off a few other smaller districts, but a lot of the players remain the same. So those partnerships just spilled over right to those newer districts as well. So it's a lot of the work that I'm going to talk to you about has to do with the partnership that we have with those districts. Talking about pre-COVID, sometimes it feels like that was forever ago, but when I take a step back, that was really last year. And so in the previous couple of years, we did a lot of work at the University of South Alabama, really looking at our teacher preparation programs and looking at what we could do to expand the pipeline. So the quality of what's required for teachers, it's very, very high. The expectations are very, very high. The rigor in terms of tests that they have to take. I know someone mentioned EdTPA earlier. That's one that we have in our state as a requirement, as well as multiple praxis tests. So there are a lot of things that impact impact the pipeline into teacher prep. So we wanted to do everything we could to help prepare our students to meet the needs so they could be successful on those outcome measures. So we did a lot of work in the last couple of years with our actually community college partners. So I was glad to have that precursor to this conversation to talk about curriculum and things that we could do together to help our students be prepared for a lot of the tests that they needed to take. In addition to that, we looked at our own curriculum and we looked very critically at how we were assessing our students within the program. So not just those external assessments, but those that we had in our program. And we saw the need that we needed to make a shift to more key assessments and critical assignments along the way to more accurately reflect what our candidates were required to do and the expectations that we had for them. So when we looked at that and we looked at knowledge, skills, and dispositions, we really did a total curriculum overhaul and redesign and looked at where courses were taught within our teacher prep curriculum and how we could couple that with the field components. So it was really important that the things that we were teaching and the things that we were expecting, then we had our students actually walk those things out in the classrooms under mentor teachers. So that was really, really an important part of our last couple of years that really all just came together last fall and the year, the spring before we started really rolling that out. We rely heavily on our classroom teachers. The model there is that we treat them as they are part of the University of South Alabama family. We have very, very close relationships with those teachers. Our supervisors are in the schools often. And when I say often, we shifted several years ago to a model that we're a team and our supervisors are in the schools weekly, every other week. They're not seen as someone that just comes once or twice a semester to a school. They are there and they're there to support our students, but also to work alongside the classroom teacher and support together in doing the work to prepare future teachers and also support the K-12 students that are there. That's been a really, really important component of what we do to try to support our students so they can be successful in being the next teacher of record, so to speak. We also examined carefully what we were doing to help our students be prepared in the light of diversity, equity, and inclusion. With that, I'm going to use the example of Mobile County Public School System. It's a very diverse system because it's so large, particularly in relation to our state. There's about 60,000 students and it's geographically large as well. So we have inner city schools, rural schools, suburban schools, all types of schools within one district. And we really work diligently to help our students have experiences that are unlike the experiences that they grew up in. And so they are immersed in different diverse placements. And then we talk about those things very intentionally as part of the curriculum. Yes, we thread it throughout the curriculum, but then there's also some places that it's specific course content that we address. So we're trying to do that in multiple facets to help students be prepared. I used to say that the most needy children needed the highest quality teachers. And then I had children. And once I had children, I shifted that to every child deserves an exceptional teacher. And I believe that. And so we do the very best that we can to prepare our students to meet the needs of children, no matter where they teach. And we're very intentional about that. The last thing I'm going to say about pre-COVID is that our students do 4 semesters of field placements. And while we don't call it an internship that's a year-long type of placement, we do, what we do is similar to what a lot of institutions do call that. In other words, what I'm saying is, so our students spend 3 days a week in the schools for 2 semesters prior to their full-time student teaching experience. So they are in the schools 1,000 hours about before they do their internship semester. So they are in the schools a very significant amount. So that was really, really kind of important for us to see that we recognize that to merge the theory and practice, our students must be in the schools as much as possible. So that's really important to how we have designed our programs at South Alabama, is that the clinicals are really, really important. I'm going to shift very quickly to what we've done during COVID. So just to give you some ideas, and this again, I'm going to say we could not have done these things and made the shift as we've made if we didn't have very deep, rich partnerships with our school districts. So last spring when we went virtual and the school districts went virtual, that was about mid-March. The first thing that we had to do very quickly was our students had to have email addresses that allow them to log into the systems at the school districts, that the school districts were employed for virtual teaching. It wasn't the same as ours. So they had to have school district email addresses. This was true in both Mobile County and Baldwin County and some of the other districts. Well, you would think that would be a big feat. We had, hundreds of students out in the field, but we worked with the districts very quickly. All of our students had school district email addresses. That was critical. There was no way to continue field placements without it because everything was virtual. So we worked with those school districts. We got that done very quickly because we already had those partnerships in place. With that being said, that was critical. Then our teachers, our teacher partners, I will be very honest and tell you there was hesitation on the part of a lot of them. They were very nervous. They didn't feel qualified anymore to mentor our students because they felt like they didn't know how to teach online and shift to virtual that quick. They were worried about not being able to support our students in the way that they needed to be successful. But together we partnered with them. We helped support the teachers. Our supervisors helped support those teachers. And at the same time, our students were actually able to be help to those teachers because they were pretty technologically savvy already. And so it worked beautifully. And I will tell you, at the end of the semester in the spring, we had those teachers that were begging, please give me a student again in the fall. We worked this beautifully. We had our students working small groups while the teacher was working small groups. They were doing virtual breakout rooms, all of these things the last spring within a week or two. And it was really, really amazing. This fall we've gone back and forth. So in our districts here locally, the K-12 students have the choice to be in class or to be virtual. So given the fact that the K-12 students have that choice, the teachers are actually managing both. So in most schools, the teachers they may be looking at a group of third graders face-to-face, or a group of 10th grade, literature students face-to-face. And then they're also managing at the same time another group of virtual students. And that's all going on at the same time. Well, the classroom teachers are actually in the school buildings. So that's the requirement of the districts that we're working with. Well, I was talking with one of our supervisors the other day, and our students are in the school buildings with the teachers helping to manage all of this. And it was a solo teaching day for one of our students, and she was teaching alone. This was last semester, and it was a first grade classroom. And the supervisor said, you just would not believe how this student teacher was managing the 12 first graders that she was teaching, and also working with the managing those students, there was another 5 online that were virtual students. She said it was absolutely amazing. And while I'm very proud of our student, of course, it's the partnership with the K-12 teacher, that first grade teacher in the class. They had worked together. They had managed it, figured it out. And so I just think what an amazing opportunity. While I agree that our students and our teachers are teaching in unprecedented times, certainly they are going to be stronger and better teachers for it in the long run. So it's pretty powerful. Our supervisors were able to are able to do observations both in person but also virtually. So we are using technology tools like never before. In fact, in the spring, some of our supervisors said, I observed more lessons than I've ever observed because the students were recording their lessons and emailing those or sending those through our system, our learning management system, to supervisors for feedback. So we have absolutely used the virtual tools. Our supervisors have used the virtual tools more than ever before so they can mix both on campus and virtual, because quite honestly, there was a transition time where our supervisors weren't allowed in the schools necessarily as the school districts were trying to navigate COVID precautions. At this time, as I've mentioned, that we're doing both virtual and on-campus instruction. Our students are participating in both. It's really school district specific, but there's mostly we're seeing a mix of that. I'm going to shift one more time and very quickly talk to you about a new program that we rolled out this fall, fall 20, yes, in the midst of COVID, called Start South. That's also a dual enrollment program. So I want to build a little bit on what we heard from Lisa that's a little bit different. And I'm going to talk to you what we're doing at South Alabama, but I'll also tell you there are several other institutions in the state of Alabama that are doing something similar. So we started at last fall, so fall of 19. We met with some school district partners. We were actually approached by the school district about some opportunities to do dual enrollment at the four-year institution. Like Lisa, in the state of Alabama, the state supports dual enrollment at the community college level. That is not true at the four-year institution level. So at the four-year institution level, the university has to support that, or the tuition has to be paid for just as in with any other student. So we developed a program really based on the teacher shortage need. So we have higher K-12 partners who are in need of teachers, as you can imagine, in all areas, quite frankly, of the high school. Yes, the traditional STEM areas, we have a teacher shortage, but we're also struggling with to find enough teachers to fill social studies classrooms and language arts classrooms. And, it's just a need that we have. So this dual enrollment program was started to help our school districts fill the need of a teacher shortage. And the difference with this program than what we do with our community colleges here in our state is our faculty are serving as the faculty for the K-12 students. So the students enroll in one of our courses, and when they enroll in one of our courses, it's taught by our faculty, and they are earning credit both at our institution, the University of South Alabama, and for the school district to meet their high school requirements. And it's helping the school district with their teacher shortage crisis. So we're able to fill some of those needs. For the payment, as I mentioned, because it's not supported by the state, our largest partner is Mobile County Public School District, and they are actually supporting financially their students that are participating in this program, or at least the majority of them. And on our side, we are scholarshiping to the tune of approximately half tuition the students that are involved in this program. So we're covering the cost of half. The school district's covering the cost of half. Right now, the school districts, the books are up to the individual students, but Mobile County has chosen to pay for the books for their students. We are partnering with other districts, and other districts are doing just other different things where the students themselves may pay for the books, the textbooks, and we have waived the fees. The university also waived the fees for these students. So it's a way that we can partner to help our districts. Yes, we're pushing this out statewide, but predominantly right now we are focusing on our districts in our region, our part of the state, because post-COVID, our goal is that we bring these students to campus regularly, that they're able to experience higher ed on campus, to participate in labs on campus, and to do some things on campus that otherwise they may not be able to do. We also really hope to grow, and this summer will be our first opportunity. Again, COVID's throwing some curveballs our way, but we're also hoping to really grow an early college experience for them, for students that want to participate in the summer. So I know I said a lot quickly. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any about any of the components that I shared.
There's a couple questions that's come through for you already, Andy. A couple from Tim Newbert. He is just full of great questions today. The first from him is, your amount of field placement is about double the usual, which is great. How do you respond to those involved with other traditional programs who say that would be impossible to implement?
So I think that one of the things is that when we made the shift to this, it's been a few years ago that we made the shift to the increased amount of field experience. We set the expectation with our students, and after the I guess word travels fast. So the initial shift to the extensive field experiences, there was some pushback. I will tell you, we have a lot of first generation college students. And so with that, some of our students, and in fact, a lot of our students still work part-time jobs. The vast majority, I'm going to say, work part-time jobs. So it's been very challenging, but we do try to support them, support our students, and they see, to be honest, and I'm just going to just put it out there, they would rather be in the schools than to be in a university classroom. So they very much enjoy their time in the schools. We've done some innovative programs throughout the years. And one that I think Megan's going to talk about that may come up in the near future for our state, but one that we did in the past is where we actually were able to pay some of our students through sub funds, particularly with teacher shortages, when they were in the schools full time for a full year. Those kind of models we need to explore more and more often for our students, because it's not really the amount of clinical experience that gives students a difficult time. It's really the demand on not being able to have a part-time job, which our students still do, and they just work it out. And we're the first to tell them it's a lot. We know it's a lot, but in the end, you're a better teacher and better prepared for what you're going to face. So, I think we try to be, the biggest supporters we can to help them make the transition to what's coming, and they know well in advance the expectations as well.
Second part to that, Andy, is does the field placement all take place in their junior and senior years, or does some occur earlier?
So the vast majority is junior and senior year. There is a very small clinical placement that takes place. It can take place in the freshman year. It depends on when they take the course. But it is a placement that is it's a more tutoring placement, but we do place them in the schools to do it. But the deep, the long, intense is definitely junior and senior year, because we kind of manage their schedules. So we have to be able to block out their schedules a good bit and put them through in cohort groups in order to manage the amount of field experiences that when we're requiring 300 to 400 hours a semester.
A third question from Tim. Do you have data showing whether future teachers attending the University of South Alabama from out of state are staying in Alabama and teaching after graduation?
So that's a great question. I will have to tell you that we could probably get that data. the vast majority of our students in teacher prep are either from Alabama or from Mississippi or Florida, because our borders are close on those sides. So I'm going to say, but the vast majority are from our state. So we don't have as many students that come from other states to do teacher ed. But I could probably get that data for you. I'm sure we probably do have that.
Oops, sorry, mute button there. A question from Amy Lamidi, I think, if I'm, apologize if I'm not pronouncing that correctly, but have you identified or designed protocols or rubrics to evaluate student teaching in the virtual and blended spaces? And has COVID shifted your thinking about university coursework focused on the virtual and blended teaching, assessing learning, etc.?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So you may be familiar with the class observation tool. We are still using that observation tool. It's a nationally normed tool that's valid and reliable, and we're still we have not shifted that. In fact, we've only been using that tool now for about a year and a half. So it's we are still using that for clinical observations. The great thing about that observation is it can be done with videoed lessons, in-person lessons, you know, with different feedback options there. And we've had to make some modifications, obviously, because of COVID with it, but we really haven't, to be quite honest, talked about changing that tool at this point. Certainly there are definitely things that with our curriculum, particularly with supporting our students, that we have talked about shifting and have shifted. So for example, when our supervisors go to the schools, they meet with our students in clinicals, whether they're student teachers or prior. And it's been challenging to meet with them. Typically we put students in schools and cohorts. So there may be 5 to 8 South Alabama students in a single school. We've really tried over the last several years to have opportunities for supervisors to have group meetings with our student teachers. And that happens in full transparency. That happens sometimes and sometimes it doesn't. It's difficult. You know, you don't want to pull them out of the class because they're doing different things at different times. Staying after school is also can be challenging. As I mentioned, we already monopolize a lot of their time, and some of them have to go to work and do those kinds of things. In addition to that, some of them are working with their corporate teachers after school. And so it's just been challenging to be consistent with that. But what we found during COVID is that with the use of Zoom and virtual tools, it is so much easier for our supervisors to meet with our students, particularly when they're trying to meet it with a cohort group of that 5 or 6 students from the same school. And it's also been very powerful for our students. They're able to talk to each other, share ideas, and also feel support that is a little bit different in times of COVID. So I think that there are definitely some shifts in terms of how we're using technology to also maximize time. So it saves a lot of time. You're not having to drive somewhere for the meeting. They're not having to come back to the university for different things. So there's definitely been some shift in how we're, I guess, presenting, offering support, but also presenting curriculum. You know, there's been the mix of that, which has been, a lot of that has shifted to virtual, which frees up time in a lot of ways for students to use their time in other ways that I definitely think is here to stay.
Great. That's all the questions that have come through for you just yet, Andy. Invite folks to continue to ask questions in the chat or let us know if you want to ask your question aloud. You had a quote here, Andy. I didn't know if you wanted to say anything about this.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. I just want to finish by saying you can see the date on this. This was on Facebook. It's from one of our cooperating teachers. She teaches 5th grade. And she posted this on Facebook, and I just was so blown away by her her tenacity and how she takes the fact that mentoring new students is so important to her. And you can read the quote, but basically what she's saying is she found out before Christmas, right, that she was going to have a student teacher this spring. When she found out, she was basically just thinking, wow, how difficult it is to be a student teacher in the time of COVID and how it's so tough for them. So she went out with her own money, bought a desk, set up the teacher's space, did all this during Christmas break, was going up to her school. So whenever the students came back and our student teacher joined her on the first day of school, her whole space was set up. And I just thought it just spoke to the depth of our partners and our partner schools and our partner teachers. And it was just, I just had to share. So thank you.
Thank you, Andy. As you had mentioned, as you kind of teed up for me, we wanted to talk a little bit about a couple other ideas that have come out of our roundtables, which I'd mentioned earlier in the process. And Monica, thank you for that question about doing any teacher apprenticeships, because it's one of the things I wanted to talk about for a couple minutes with you all. We've got some really innovative ideas coming out of our 4 roundtables. As most of you all, I'm sure, know, teacher residencies are becoming a lot more popular in our states and around the country. Louisiana, of course, has a well-established 1-year residency program requirements in our region, and other states are moving toward extending student teaching timelines or moving toward year-long residencies as well. A couple of our states, including North Carolina and Alabama, are exploring not only teacher residencies, but also the idea of what they've kind of informally sort of labeled as teacher apprenticeships. And this idea is really around negotiating and working with different partners and stakeholders in the state to really figure out a way to provide an actual structured statewide license, kind of like a learning permit, in a way where any student in college who has at least a transfer degree or 60 plus hours at their college or community college can apply to become a state student apprenticeship, a teacher apprentice for the states. This is something that Alabama and North Carolina are talking about and exploring in different ways. It would provide a student teacher the opportunity to teach, learn about teaching and assist in the classroom, much like a regular student internship, for 2 years or more while they're trying to earn their bachelor's degree. And the idea is also expanding this to not only traditional preparation candidates who are enrolled in ed prep, but other college students as well who are getting key degrees in perhaps STEM kinds of areas or other great content areas that can really enrich their teaching experience as well. And then working with them to get all of that early experience and early exposure to great teaching in the classroom. Alabama's actually, their roundtable has proposed and published a report with some really great ideas, including a pilot for teacher apprenticeships and providing supports where advanced teachers are identified and provide mentorship to the apprentices as well as early career teachers who are fully licensed. So we're really excited to track that. Andy was part of that group. We're hoping that the legislators in Alabama are supportive of that, and the pilot can kick off here within the next year or two. And then in North Carolina, actually last week, the North Carolina Roundtable and our team shared some information with the State Board of Education that included an idea of this learning permit apprenticeship kind of license and expanding their licensure system to include that. So our next 2 webinars in this series will actually expand on some of this work and talking about teacher licensure and how to use licensure as a tool for opening up pathways. And then our third webinar will be talking about teacher supports and teacher compensations. We'll talk a little bit about an idea that's come out of Oklahoma to really push and nudge lawmakers to change some laws there to allow for paid student teaching. The idea has already taken hold in Oklahoma and was introduced. And so a group that we helped facilitate in Oklahoma are pushing to strengthen that and actually come up with a fund so that all colleges and universities in Oklahoma could potentially pay their student teachers, which would be an excellent cost savings piece for students, as well as potentially an incentive for folks who are interested in the field. So there's a couple things we wanted to also share with you all today. Next, I'd like to hear again from Stevie on our team at SREB. He's going to talk a little bit about diversity and equity.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks to our panelists for providing such great insight and examples of the work that they're doing within their states. We certainly appreciate that. And as we talked about various pathways and methods for expanding opportunities for those interested in teaching, much consideration should be given to efforts around diversity and equity to advance teaching the profession and to diversify the teacher education workforce. With the use of a social justice perspective on teacher education, schools and colleges of education should radically transform their policies and practices if they are to become places where teachers and prospective teachers and educators learn to become effective with students of all backgrounds across the country. Most teacher education programs, as you know, certainly acknowledge the principle and the importance of developing teachers that are from diverse backgrounds. However, there must be strategic and concerted efforts to ensure that EPPs target prospective teachers from low-income and culturally diverse backgrounds in order to experience greater gains in student success for students of color and diverse backgrounds in K-12 education. As the research indicates, as many of you know here on the webinar today, students from diverse backgrounds often are more likely to persist forward to pursue higher education just based on the diversity within teacher education, diversity in the teachers that actually teach them in the early grades of kindergarten through third grade. So there's actual data that supports this. So many might ask, how can this be accomplished? I'm certain that as educators, there are definitely initiatives and thought processes and conversations all around the country, and definitely through the efforts that Megan and Jessica are leading with SREB about exactly how to work to diversify teacher workforces across the country and to ensure that equitable opportunities are given to diverse backgrounds in entering this noble profession. This looks like special initiatives and programs aimed to encourage entry in teaching well before college. Often we must understand that we can't wait until students are already in college to begin to qualify the importance of entering teacher education. There should be conversations within school districts, within communities to enlighten students about entering the field of education and what that career looks like and what career progression in teacher education is and can potentially be for various backgrounds. Working to create campaigns within states and school districts, communities, and neighborhoods that dispel the myths of entering the teaching profession early on. You know, we often hear that one, the salaries aren't great. Two, becoming a teacher is a very stressful environment, a very stressful career. We definitely have seen that with the most recent happenings with COVID-19 and how educators have had to grapple with transitioning from face-to-face instruction to online instruction. And so we have to work very intensely to encourage students, not only from African-American backgrounds, but Asian, Hispanic backgrounds to really think about entering this profession. One such way that I like to think about this is often I definitely understand that we need to have diverse teachers in the classroom, but there is certainly career progression in entering teaching. Just because you enter the profession in the classroom does not mean that is the end all be all, but certainly having some years under your belt to provide that service to students who look like you and look like others, other teachers from diverse backgrounds is certainly a rewarding experience for both the teacher and the student. And then finally, continued conversation, policy revision, and collaborative thought that enhances teacher compensation, that works to enhance teacher compensation and incentives that make entry into the teaching profession more attractive from a more diverse background. Just as the work that's been explained and talked about on this webinar by our two panelists and led by Megan and Jessica, these types of roundtables, continued conversation is what we need to enhance diversity and keeping this in the forefront of those who make the real decisions about enhancing the teacher workforce from the perspective of diversity and equity. Although there are a number of requirements to enter and successfully complete teacher education programs, state legislators and higher education leaders should take a critical look at these requirements and work aggressively to eradicate any barriers that may preclude or keep students from diverse backgrounds or those who seek to enter the profession from passing licensing or licensure exams, as well as persisting forward successfully through EPP programs. These are just some suggested promising practices or thoughts around the areas of diversity and equity in teacher education that can help not only diversify the teacher workforce, but also help students become more successful in K-12 education and ultimately move forward from that segment of education into higher education. Megan?
Thanks, Stevie. Appreciate that. And just another plug for our next webinar. We're really going to talk a lot about removing those barriers, addressing kind of the entry assessment pieces, different requirements within licensure, and talk about some creative, innovative ideas that a few of our states are working toward to really break down those barriers, which will help bring in teachers of all backgrounds, but most especially, definitely the data is showing us can be an excellent tool in bringing in more diverse students of color. So we have a few minutes left, and we'd like to open it up again just for general Q&A on any of the ideas shared today or any of the work that you guys are doing in your own states related to expanding pathways into the profession and targeting, and improving preparation. So invite you to write questions in the chat or let us know if you'd like to comment or ask a question aloud. Do you see one come through real quick from Judy Beck? Is the January 19th webinar Redesigning Teacher Licensure? Yes, that is the second webinar in our series of 3 on January 19th at 10 a.m. Eastern time. We'll be talking about redesigning teacher licensure and really addressing those barriers, as I mentioned, as well as some other key ideas. And our third webinar will be Better Teacher Supports and Compensation on January 27th at 10:30. Other questions from our participants or panelists? If you'd like to ask questions of each other, that's certainly welcome as well. Tim Newbert, is SRV taking any steps to improve the perception of teaching as a profession? The fact that many parents and current teachers do not encourage young people to become teachers is very concerning. Thank you, Tim, for that comment. And I'll invite all of the panelists here to add, but I'll just start by saying, yes, SRV is definitely working toward and talking about and addressing this issue of the perception of teaching and the struggles within it. We'll talk a lot about that in our next 2 webinars as well. And it's a question at the forefront of each of our roundtables as we're convening those conversations, and education leaders are really, they're bringing that up at the earliest of our conversations. What can we do? What really has caused, and what can we do to tackle the negative perception of teaching? There's so many aspects to it. A great deal of it, I think we'll talk about during our 3rd webinar with teacher supports and compensation. But this is a big piece of our work, obviously a big piece in recruiting students of color into the teaching profession as well. I'm not sure if Andy or Lisa or other folks from SRV want to speak to anything specific on that. I think probably coming out of our states, we might have more specificity there on addressing the perception of teaching.
Sure. Go ahead.
I was just going to say nothing too specific, but I just wanted to add that I do believe that addressing the perceptions around entering teaching, and as I just spoke of, is probably one of the biggest issues that I think districts and states must really work to combat when working to grow and diversify the teaching workforce in their districts or states. I think that this is something that states really should take a critical look at and really figure out a way to dispel those myths around what teaching is and how it actually benefits the person in that profession and ultimately the students. And so I think once that is actually determined and how to effectively do that, many of the challenges that we see around teacher shortages will potentially go away. Not immediately, but I think that it will put a large dent in many of the shortages that we're seeing happening and that have been occurring over many years now.
So I'd like to piggyback on what Stevie just shared. In North Carolina, we have also been working with a group called Best NC. They're a group that convenes public and private stakeholders. And we have a project called Stride. So that along with another project called Teach NC is helping to target marketing and recruitment. So if you Google Best NC, you'll find more about that, or Teach NC. Again, or you can reach out to me and I'll send you some direct links. But we're trying to approach that perception issue with multiple different strategies. So again, looking at public and private partnerships. It can't all be done from higher ed. It can't all be done with our Department of Public Instruction. It really is, as was mentioned, getting to the families and helping them to understand and also reimagine what being a teacher looks like. We've had quite a few struggles in the past few years with the respect given to teachers. Of course, teacher pay, all those issues will still exist, but we're trying to tackle it from lots of different angles.
Thanks for that, Lisa. I just put links to Best NC and the Teach NC website there in the chat. Any other questions, comments, or wrap-up comments from our panelists? Okay, great. Well, we really appreciate everyone tuning in today. A super special thanks to Dr. Andy Kent and Dr. Lisa Eads for joining us, as well as participating on the education roundtables for the last couple of years. We really appreciate that. Hopefully there's some good info here for folks. We'll be sharing the recording of this webinar on our website, the same link that you used to register for this. And don't forget to register for our next 2 webinars next week and the following on teacher licensure redesigns, as well as teacher supports and compensation. We'll continue this conversation and hear from some other folks in our state roundtables as well. So good day to everyone, and we'll hopefully see you all next week.